In the heart of the night, this world were bright, we will set it alight. In the heart of the night, in the heart of the night, this world will burn bright, we will set it alight. In the heart of the night. Hello everyone, I am Anthropomantic Fiend, and I do horror-related things on the internet. Today I am going to be reviewing Indestructible Man. This movie came out in 1956. It stars the amazing Lon Chaney Jr., obviously played the Wolfman, and went on to play pretty much every other Universal monster, and he's been in a lot of other great movies besides. No other actors that I really know all that well, so let's just get into the movie. This movie is about a criminal named Butcher Benton, played by Chaney, and his partners in crime. Their names were Squeamy Ellis and Joe Marcelli. They had stolen a bunch of money from somewhere and hidden it in the sewers of this city. Benton had hidden it because he didn't want to give the money to the other guys, so they basically sold him out. He got caught and he got put on death row and sentenced to death. But these scientists who are given his body to perform some experiments involving cells accidentally end up reviving it Frankenstein style, and in the process multiplying his cells in such a way that he becomes near indestructible. His skin becomes super tough and basically impenetrable, and his strength is like tripled. He is the Indestructible Man from that point on, and he goes after his former partners in crime to get revenge on them and kill them, as well as to kill Paul Lowe, who is, I think, the attorney who sentenced Benton to death. Kills a few other people along the way, and in the meantime we've got another detective who has been investigating this case for a while and gets embroiled with the whole thing and tries to figure out what the hell's going on. Acting in this movie, Lon Chaney Jr. is good, as he generally is. He doesn't get to talk in this movie, except at the very beginning before he gets sentenced to death, because for whatever reason the experiment that brings him back to life also fries his vocal cords, so it's a mute performance, and he does pretty well with that, although there's a lot of voiceover narration explaining what he's actually thinking instead of just relying on his performance. So it's not a terribly interesting performance, but he does well. There's not much else to say about him. He's Lon Chaney, and he plays the character well. I don't know why they made him mute, either. Maybe he didn't want to say the lines, or I literally have no idea, but decent performance from him. Then there's the detective, whose name is literally Dick Chasen. Why they decided to name him that, I don't know, but they did. And I can't get over that, but he does a good job. He's just kind of an all-around nice guy holding up the law. All of the characters in this are honestly just standard tropes, and they don't really go beyond that, but they're all well acted. Unlike with some of these movies that I've reviewed, which do go through those standard tropes, they aren't standard horror character tropes. They're very much standard, like, crime detective movie tropes. This movie is very much a crime drama that halfway through this sci-fi, it's not halfway through, it's earlier on, but this sci-fi horror element creeps in and brings an interesting angle to it. But it's basically a crime thriller with a little bit of a Frankensteinian element thrown in. All the acting is decent all around. There is Detective Dick Chasen. He's decent. He's also the guy who does all the narration in the movie, which kind of feels very cheesy and dramatic, but you get a reason for it at the end of the movie, which isn't a spoiler. You realize that, oh, this is him dictating the case into this machine. Don't know what it's called, can't really think of it right now, but he's dictating all the details of the case and then closing it. You kind of wonder, why does he know what Benton was thinking at this time? How could he have known? But he basically just says at the end of the movie, you know, a lot of this was guesswork. I just filled in the blanks as best as I could. So we're just taking his word for it, that this is how it happened. It actually makes sense as a framing device. It just feels kind of overbearing sometimes, but oh well. Then there's Eva, who is Dick's love interest, and she works at a burlesque house, and she would, in a lot of other movies like this, probably get made into like this femme fatale stereotype character, but she's not. She even says in the movie, it's just like any other job. She's just an average person, and I liked that they don't try to make her into this femme fatale character just because she works at a burlesque house. She's a character like any other in the movie, and she's very well acted. There were a few other little characters in the movie that I found somewhat entertaining. One of them's connected to a spoiler, so I don't really want to talk about him. Another one is this guy who works at the bar where Squeamy Ellis and Joe Marcelli like to go and drink, and he's just done with both of them as soon as they walk in. He's just like, drink up and get out. I find him mildly amusing. Nothing in this movie really emotionally gets to me that much. It's kind of just a nice little B-movie. I found him funny because he just instantly, as soon as they start talking a little bit too much, he's just like, I hate you, get out of my bar, leave. So he was fun. Music in this movie is pretty standard issue, dramatic, orchestral, horror thriller type music. Nothing really stand out about it at all, but it was nice. The sets were not all that interesting. They were basically just what you would see in basically any movie in the 1950s set in the city. Just the interior of the police station, of burlesque house. You've got the different buildings around the cities, the bars, etc., etc. You've got the prison for a little bit. The only set that I did find really interesting was the lab, because when the scientists are reviving Benton, we get a lot of close-ups on the equipment that are very, very reminiscent of movies like Frankenstein and Man-Made Monster. But still, the equipment isn't really all that interesting. This movie's a lot more grounded in reality than both of those movies, in spite having this science fiction element. That part was really the most cool thing of the sets, but other than that, there are very standard movie set in a city sets. And the costumes are really nothing interesting too. They're just average 50s clothing, I suppose. So it was decent, but not really that interesting. The cinematography, really nothing interesting there. Again, just standard movie stuff, but it gets the job done and it works well. Not really anything to think about there though, but it was good. Again, the story is a really cool one because it takes this crime thriller storyline and injects sci-fi horror into it to give it this nice little twist, and I was very engaged in the story the whole time. There's a little romance between Dick and Eva, like I mentioned. It's kind of cute, but nothing all that memorable. We do have a little scene where they go out and get a hamburger together and they talk. We get to know a little more about why he joined the police force and why she works at the burlesque house, and they're very cute, and you do get to learn more about them as a character. There's good character development there, and I do care about them, so that was good. The kills in the movie aren't all that interesting. Again, this is 50s horror, so no gore or anything particularly creative, but I did feel bad for most of the people that he killed because most of them didn't deserve it. There's basically just Squeamy and Joe that do deserve it, and their kills I did find mildly entertaining, but I'll talk about that. in a little bit. There's a scene where Benton goes to the burlesque house to talk to Eva because he's been connected to her through a former roommate of Eva's who was also Benton's former girlfriend. So they're connected, and he's left some stuff with her that they need to talk about. This is one of the scenes I remember most vividly from when I first watched it. He can't tell her why he's alive or that he's indestructible, so he just takes up a pair of scissors and tries to stab it through his hands, and it won't go through. And I just thought that scene was cool. It sticks out in my memory for some reason, because I watched this movie really early on when I was first getting into horror film, actually. Before this, I had seen the Universal monster movies. I had seen, the Frankensteins and the Draculas, and I had seen the original Phantom of the Opera, Jekyll and Hyde. I had seen Nosferatu and a few other movies, so I was really just getting into classic horror, starting at the beginning. And in the midst of all that, I also happened upon this movie, and parts of it do stick in my memory still from when I very first watched it, so it's a good one. One drawback to the story, though, is there is this element of casual racism in it, and it's the tiniest thing, but I'm picking up on it every time I see one of these movies, just because it's always there. There's just a scene where in the background somebody's getting their shoes shined, and it's just this black guy, and he's the only black character in the movie, and he's just going about his business, smiling at people as they pass, and it's just I don't like the casual racism in these movies, but it's there, and you can't get around it. It's always gonna be in these movies from this period, so that's really my only dislike regarding the movie. Other parts of the movie are there's not a lot to talk about, but I thought it was a really solid B horror movie, and it's not so much a horror movie really as it is a crime thriller with a sci-fi horror twist to it. That said, there was one other thing that is a spoiler because it happens at the end that I really didn't like. So there are two dislikes, which are the casual racism and the spoiler thing that I'll get into in a minute. But other than those two things, this is a really solid 50s B horror sci-fi crime movie, and I recommend you give it a chance because it's nothing especially remarkable, but it's a good movie, and I think you'll enjoy it. So that is the spoiler-free section of my review of Indestructible Man. Here are the spoilers. So there's a scene early on after Benton has escaped from prison where he goes and is walking around the roadside, and he finds a car, and there's this very attractive girl who is trying to hitchhike and get someone's attention. Well, not hitchhike because she has a car, but she's trying to get somebody's attention, and gets Benton's attention not because of her but because of the car, which he needs. And he goes over, and this guy steps out of the shadows, and he's just like, I hope you don't mind me using my girl as bait. I'm a carnival man myself, and what's your profession? Never mind. And he's just very mouthy and kind of obnoxious, but still funny. Benton just lifts up the car and fixes it instantly and freaks him out. The guy bends over to do something and he just stomps his head, and the girl freaks out, and I feel bad for her, and he just drives off. And that was a very entertaining scene for several reasons. It's the implications, because it never shows Benton stomping the guy's head, but it's still, the implications there are brutal. And then the guy himself, he's funny because he just will not shut up, and then because he'll just ask Chaney a question and he can't respond, but even though he can't respond, before you would even get a chance to, the guy's just like, never mind where you're from, you should come with us, you can make money as a strongman or whatever. So that was a fun scene. When Squeamy and Joe die, it's literally just Chaney picking them up and throwing them off a balcony or down the stairs, and you just hear them scream as they fall. And I have no idea why, when that happens in these movies, I find it hilarious, but I do. I found those deaths fun, and I didn't really feel bad for them because they were kind of unsavory characters anyway, so I found those scenes entertaining. There's another scene, however, where this woman is freaking out because somebody had gotten in Benton's way, and he had killed the guy in passing and moved on, but she's just describing the death to the police, and he had like picked up the guy and snapped his back, and she's describing how she had heard the sound of his back snapping like it was nothing. You don't even see the kill. It's not even in the movie, but the description of it is very brutal and dark. So that was good. There's a scene at the very end of the movie that I found really interesting for whatever reason, where Paul Lowe, who's the attorney I mentioned earlier, has come to the police station, basically intentionally gets in a fight with an officer and punches him to get locked up in prison so that Benton can't come for him. And they figure this out, and they use reverse psychology on him by saying, you know what, you were out of control, we'll just let you out. He just starts flipping out. He's like, no, wait, you can't do this to me, and tries to find other excuses to get himself locked up, and then eventually ends up spilling all the info on how he had helped Squeamy Joe and Benton to pull off this heist. I like sort of this element of trickery and reverse psychology there. I just thought it was an interesting scene. Eventually, they track down Benton and they find him in the sewers, and one of them's got a flamethrower, and they figure out that, like the monster from Frankenstein, fire tends to be his big weakness. So they end up burning him with it, and the burn makeup that they use is really cool. His skin just instantly becomes very shriveled and gross looking, and I like it a lot. And then at the very, very end, they end up trapping him in some sort of electrical power area and throwing this switch, and his body starts glowing. The effect was there too, and basically just all the electricity there burns him to a crisp. And they're like, so finally the electricity that brought Benton back to life has also returned him to death, or something like that. And I thought that scene was cool. I liked the glowing effect, so a nice climax. And then there's the thing that I didn't like, which is the very end of the movie, where there's another cute little in the car hamburger with Eva scene between her and Dick, and he tells her, you know, I got you fired. And his rationale for that is, I figured being my wife would take up all of your time. And it's just like, okay, I'm sure you guys will be happy together, but don't get her fired from her job just because. No. I hated that being the finale of the movie. I hated that so much. But other than that, and the little bit of casual racism in the movie, which is yuck as well, I think this is a solid B movie. Nothing too out of the way, but I definitely recommend looking into it if you just want a fun crime sci-fi horror movie to spend some time watching. So thank you for checking out my review, and hopefully I will see you in another video. Bye.